Yo, this is Ben Cubbage from Elevated Trips at elevatedtrips.com. I've lived on the Tibetan Plateau for about 13 years now. It's been a great honor to be out here and to have a travel agency and to see some of the wildest and last reach places. And this week it is my honor to be visiting some of my friends, my local Tibetan friends. We're going to be taking a look at what the nomad life looks like on the harsh Tibetan Plateau between 12,000 and 14,000 feet. You can see this is kind of what we're dealing with as far as landscape. It is dry, just brown grass, and it is like this for at least 6 to 8 months of the year. Right now, it's probably about 0 degrees Celsius, but at night, it's definitely going to drop here to about -15 and -20 Celsius. This is how the families live. They all have one little house where they live in, and then in the winters, they kind of bed down here and they herd their sheep out in the mountains, and then in the summers they move up to higher elevations. The kids, they just run around and play freely. It's kind of a wild life for the kids. They just run around and herd the sheep, and yeah, there's not too much that's going to hurt a kid out here. So they live a pretty happy life, like a free dog, just enjoying the landscape. So really no running water out here because it's too cold, too high. There's just not the infrastructure to support it. So these guys could go weeks, maybe even months without taking a shower. Best case scenario, they probably heat up a little bit of water in a bucket and do a little bucket shower, maybe a little face wash, but that's about it. So they don't have the modern conveniences. The bathroom is everything behind me there. They just kind of go out in the field in the middle of the night, and that's that. And then life is pretty simple. They may have the opportunity, and this is what Tibetan nomads often do for shower, is they go into town, maybe drive 15, 20 minutes into a larger town of maybe 1,000 people. And usually there's a little bathhouse in there where you can get some hot water. So a lot of Tibetans do take a shower, maybe once every 2 weeks or once a month at a bathhouse. But, you can imagine getting dusty and dirty after herding sheep all day long in the hay. You might want to wash that off. So in that case, they do sometimes head into a local hot springs, or maybe even a little bathhouse that has channeled to hot springs, and that's what they do for washing off. But otherwise, they certainly don't shower as much as we do in the West, and it's pretty cold out here, so there's not that much need to shower because they're not that sweaty. So you can see behind me the hay pile. Obviously, with the condition of this grass here, not really enough to feed a flock of 100 to 200 sheep, which is most of what these nomads have. And so they actually purchase hay, and they'll use this hay to get their sheep through the winter because the grass is not substantial enough here. The sheep pen here, pretty modern kind of affair. It's kind of just a concrete wall with a little roof over it. That building behind me is the sheep pen. There's probably about 100 sheep that live in there, and then each morning they'll let them out and let them graze a little bit on the hay, and they might graze a little bit in the mountains, but mostly they stay pretty close to home. Behind me here, this is a little, I guess you call it a stove. So they actually put yak poop inside of this stove. And in the summer, they'll probably build their tent around it in the grasslands. But they just leave the stove here. Obviously, no one's going to steal it or take it away. And then in the winter, it just sits here by itself. In the summer, they'll actually put a tent around this and use this for cooking over yak dung. And this is a little Tibetan home behind me. You can see the little tractor back there. It's kind of just a very simple mud home. And we're going to go inside and see how Tibetan nomads live in the winter. This is the nomad house, which means they're up in the mountains at 4,500 meters in the summer, herding their yaks and sheep. But in the winter, they need to bring them down lower here because it is so cold and windy. So they have this little winter house to survive for 3 or 4 months in December through March. Okay, we're here inside a Tibetan home. If you're kind of curious what home looks like on the Tibetan Plateau, it's very simple. You can see behind me, the family all sleeps in one bed. So it's a father, mother, and 2 sons, 4 and 6 years old in this case. They all sleep in this bed. And then there's a stove. That's where all the cooking happens. Little family altar where they make their daily sacrifices to various deities and Buddhas. And then this is the kitchen. Super simple. So this is all one room. You can see a little bit of soy sauce back there, a little kettle, but you know, it's one room. I'd say maybe 50 square meters, pretty small. You know, if we were definitely smaller than a really small trailer in America. So yeah, this is how a lot of Tibetan families live. One room, one bed, everything is all kind of just together. So there's not very much privacy for the parents. This part is the yangtai, or what we would call kind of the sunroom or the porch. So yeah, nice glass, south-facing glass, so the sun comes in here, and then they can relax here in the summer. This would be a really nice place to, you know, just absorb some sun, get out of the cold. But we're at 3,200 meters above sea level, so you can imagine in winter it gets really gnarly cold out here, and you can see the grass behind me out there. It's just barren and desolate. The textures out here are just so unreal. It's like something kind of alien where the shore meets the sand. After you get out of the sand here, the textures are weird, unreal. There's like these weird rivers of ice and giant spiky ice formations. And yeah, it feels like we're obviously standing on a meter thick ice, but there's obviously some movement in the water where it breaks up, separates, cracks, melts down, refreezes. There's just a lot of crazy and weird textures. It's not just like a sheet of ice, but it's like super bumpy, and you definitely couldn't ice skate on this ice. Oh, it's so cold. We're here at Qinghai Lake, one of the largest and holiest lakes in all of the Tibetan Plateau. This lake is so big it can actually be seen from space. And we're here at my favorite time at Qinghai Lake. And there's no one here, there's no tourists. It's winter, part of winter, on the 10th day of January, New Year 2024. You can see the lake is just frozen solid behind me. And that's a significant thing considering it's about 120 kilometers long. For a lake this size to freeze, you know it is cold out here. This is kind of the texture of the sand here, very grainy. People definitely have driven out here. Chinese tourists drive out here on these beaches, and you see tracks back here for cars, but you can tell that people have gotten stuck with their cars out here trying to drive on the sand dunes and until they get their little crappy Chinese cars stuck in the beach. You probably can't see it way out in the distance. We're probably 50 kilometers away from the mountains here, but there are a series of 4,000 meter and 4,500-meter mountains all around this lake, which is one thing that makes this like really interesting. It's not just the lake features, but all the mountains around it are all just really high grasslands where the nomads herd their yaks in the summer. That's one thing I actually recommend doing as you come to Qinghai Lake. Of course, the lake is beautiful. It's cool to take a picture out here, but you know, it's kind of just a big, expensive lake. There's not that much to do unless you're picnicking or, you know, gonna like hang out in the sand a little bit. But if you spend a couple hours here on the lake and then actually head over to those mountains behind me in the far, far distance and do a little hike, do 3-4 hours up and hour or two down, and that would be a fun way to spend a full day at Qinghai Lake. So we're about 100 meters out on the ice here, and you can just see it's just blazing white with 360 degrees all around me. I parked my car back there in the sand dunes, and in the summer, this place is totally full of probably 10,000 to 20,000 tourists per day. But because it's so cold on the winter now, we're the only people probably here within, I'd say, 5 or 10 kilometers. I don't think there's anyone else out here. There's a few nomads that live out here on these beaches and herd their yaks and sheep in the high grasslands here. But as you can imagine, it is tough to eke out an existence in such an environment as this. Look at this super weird ice river back here. I'm in the middle of the lake, and to my right, it's kind of jumbled ice blocks. To my left, kind of jumbled ice blocks. And then here, I'm just standing in this river that kind of runs through the middle of a lake. And this is a huge lake that's over 100 kilometers long. So it's weird that a kind of a river would appear here and then just freeze. So this must be just based on kind of the freeze-thaw cycles of the water. And yeah, as it comes and goes, laps up against the shore, I guess it actually kind of like moves in and out. It's almost like a living being in and of itself as it changes and moves direction and cracks. Awesome, guys. Subscribe to our channel, give us a like, follow us, check us out on YouTube, and follow our website at elevatedtrips.com for more adventures and travel on the Tibetan Plateau.